So I wanted to talk a little bit about outlier analysis and creating an automated outlier analysis report. So we could actually do this in Excel using the BI techniques in Excel. Now, outlier analysis is critical, especially for those of us who enter management. Usually, if we are managers, we are concerned about exceptions and deviations from the norm and how to treat with them. So outlier analysis helps us to identify those exceptions. So let's see how we could actually build an outlier analysis reporting mechanism. So we're going to do an example looking at branch sales. Now there are many methods for outlier analysis. The one we're going to look at is using z-values. And so usually if we looking out at outliers, if we're looking at exceptions, normally an outlier would be values which have a standard deviation from the mean plus or minus 3 times. So in terms of working out an outlier value, you could actually set up a model in Excel to look at the transactions, work out the mean by the class of transaction, and then checking to see how that varies from the standard deviation value for that particular class of values. And in Excel, we could look at outliers using z-values, and in the method we're going to use, we're also going to use scatter charts and automatically flag the outliers using the z-values. So let's see how we do this. So to create an outlier report, the first step is we need to have the data. So in this case, we have two files with the data. So we have some sample files here. Text file, we have a file called store data, and if I open this file, you'll see that it has revenue transactions for different branches over a period of time. And we have another file with additional data here called store data additional. So to build our automated model, we would normally use Power Query to do this. So the first step would be to create a connection to the data. So let me just run through it quickly. If we go to the data menu for this model here, we go to the queries and connection tab. It's going to show us here the query we built in order to analyze that data and extract the C values. So I'm just going to double click on this query here called store data, which we would have built. And that should put us in the Power Query menu. I'm going to get that Power Query editor coming up here. So what we do is we use Power Query in Excel to connect to the source data. So in this case, the source data is the link we would have mentioned before. I'm going to click on this little gear wheel. You'll see the source data is in this file here. It's connecting to that text file. And once we connect to the text file, there would have been some fixing to do on the data. I would have promoted the headers. And then we needed to group the data. The data which comes in is transactional data by store. So I would have tell Power Query to group the data by store and give us the total sales and the average sales. And I would have had it given us the details for the month and the individual revenue figures as well. So you have the total for this particular store here. We have the average sales over the period for that store. And we have the transactional revenue amount here for this particular date. Once we work this out, we need to work out the standard deviation, and Power Query is also able to do that by looking at the data. And then once we work out that standard deviation, we could actually just sort of reorder the column and added another custom column to work out the z value. So to work out the z value, the formula is normally to take the individual revenue transaction here, which would be the revenue figure here, take it away from the average sale, and then divide by the standard deviation to see how many values above or below the mean, what we call it z-score is, in order to see if there are significant anomalies. As I indicated before, any value which is greater than or less than 3 or minus 3 would be considered an anomaly, and there are one or two values like that in the data. All right, so you have about 3.75 here. There would have been a negative 3 above. The last step would have been a column to flag that data, and so I would have added a conditional column to look at the data and then establish the z-score limit. So the formula here would have been, if I click the gear wheel, it's just writing out the formula. Very simple conditional formatting rule box here. So I'm just gonna close and load, and then it would generate the schedule here for us in the sheet with the outlier values flagged greater than limit. This one was 4, so it would be greater than the maximum limit. This one was -3, so it would have been less than the maximum limit. Once we do this, I could tell Excel to extract the outliers. If I click on this query here, it's going to take us to the sheet, and the query actually just limits the values from the other sheet to give us this report with just the outliers. The next step would be to actually create a chart, a customized chart with which would be a scatter chart in this case. So in Excel, if you go to the chart design menu, chart type, you want to choose the chart type, which is the XY scatter chart. And so from here, I would have created the chart and then used a slicer here against the table data on the sheet. Now with the slicer, I could review the data by store. So if I want to see the outliers for everything, that is what is currently being displayed. There are a couple of outliers above, one outlier below. If I just wanted to look at the Chaguanas branch, for example, you can see here there are two outliers. If we go to Hoover, we have one outlier which is above Port Spain, and so on and so forth. If we want to look at two territories, we just control click to select the territory, and the outlier is highlighted. Now what I would have done here is I would have used a helper column to actually tag the outliers, tag the exceptions. And so you would have seen this data label column here where I would have done the tagging automatically. Now, just to see if this is dynamic, the data here is only looking at these regions here, but suppose next month I have a new file. I could actually look at the outliers by going back to this query here, the store data query. And changing the source of the file here. So I will go to the source here and just change it probably if I have a new file. Change the link to that new file. So over here I would browse and go into the folder With the file. Here we have the additional data. Click import the cookie. So once we do that, the same steps that we had before will run, and now we're going to click close and load. So if we look here, it's going to regenerate the outlier report, and now we will see that there is a new store called Scarborough, and there are new transactions here, and sure enough there are 2 outliers in the store. All right, so this is our overall of the report. So guys, that's how one way that we could actually do outlier analysis. You could also look at outliers with box plots and stuff in Excel, and there are other techniques.